And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Keynotes Stage at Infosecurity Europe for the session on You're Under Cyber Attack, Now What? My name's Dave Clemente. I'm a researcher with the Information Security Forum, and very pleased to welcome you to this session. We've got an excellent set of panelists who have extensive experience with all the questions, really, in fact, that we'll be dealing with today. To my left, your far right, Chris Gibson, Director of CERT-UK. Tom Mullen, Head of Cyber Response and IT Security at Telefonica UK. John Townsend, Head of Cyber Intelligence and Response at Department for Work and Pensions. Again, very pleased to welcome you. We've got an hour. Each of the panelists will begin by delivering several minutes of remarks, touching on some of the various points that are on the agenda. Then we'll jump into Q&A. There's plenty of you here, and almost certainly by the time they're done speaking, there will be plenty of questions. So we want to leave sufficient time for that. With that, I will turn over to Chris.
Okay, thank you. I'll stand up. I can't bear sitting around doing these things. So, my name's Chris Gibson. I am the Director of CERT-UK for my sins. I've been doing this for about a year now. I'd like to explain, what we do in CERT-UK very, very briefly, because I can talk about that for quite a long time, and I know that's not what we're here to do. And then how that relates to what I think you should be doing if you are under cyber attack. And I guess my first message is, if you're under cyber attack saying, what now, you're already in a very, very bad place. Because what now is not the message to be thinking when you're under cyber attack. So what we do, and this is what I think everybody should be doing, are the four things that I'm going to talk about. One, we do national incident management. That is when things significantly go bang in the night. That is based on real-world impact. That is based on, people harm coming to people. It is based on real nasty things happening. It's based on power going down for swathes of the country. It's based on, transport sectors going down. It's based on some significant things. We have not had one of these yet. I'm very thankful about that. But what we're all about there is planning and exercising and making sure that when we have done, we know what we're doing. And that's exactly what you should be doing. Planning and exercising so that when you get hacked, you have a plan, you have a process, and you know where you're going. Second thing we do is cyber critical national infrastructure incident handling. Again, have an incident handling process in place. So it's not just the big things you need to be worrying about, it's the everyday incidents that you need to be handling to make sure that you're spotting stuff early, that you're able to kill things early and bring them down so they don't get to a national incident. And that's why we do it. We do it so that when there are incidents in the critical national infrastructure, we can manage them down rather than waiting them to hit the big button that says it's a national incident. Again, really, really valuable, but you should be doing that now. Third thing, situational awareness, understanding the world you live in, the world you're existing in, and the world your systems are surviving in. And surviving is very much the word I would use here. If you haven't been hacked, believe me, that's because you don't know you've been hacked. Pretty much everyone in this room will have been hacked at some point. It's extremely difficult these days to defend against a truly determined adversary. When we talk about advanced persistent threat, I usually throw the advanced away and I just talk about persistent threat. If someone wants to have you, they will have you. And if they really want to try hard, they will just take the time to do it. So it's understanding that, and it's that situational awareness. Again, you should be doing this, you should be monitoring open source, you should be looking at news stories, you should be looking at vulnerability feeds to see what the environment your systems are in and how that's going. And the fourth thing I do is international point of contact. Now that's because I'm a national CERT, but in the same way, every company should be talking to their colleagues, talking to their peers, talking to other people in the ecosystem that they live in. Again, that's the internet, quite a broad space, to understand how they can get help from other people and how other people can help them. So it's all about collaboration and partnership. So that's what I do from a nation point of view, but that's what every single company I think should be doing anyway, and you should have that all in place before you're under a cyber attack. That's my spiel.
Chris, thank you very much.
I'll remain seated. It's Tom Mullen here from Telefonica. And I like Chris's speech, a lot of things about how you report and how they'll deal with the incidents. But before you even deal with an incident, you've got to prepare for it. You've got to have a team that's trained up, working to the correct processes. Without that in place, you've got no basis to do any operational work. So they need to know what they're doing and how to do it. And they've got the skill sets, the correct training for the job they're actually doing, they're actually undertaking. Do they know how to collect evidence? How do they behave when you get attacked? What's the behaviours? If you go to a court a year after an incident and the behaviours are we panicked, scenes of panic, people didn't know what they were doing, that'll impact on how you're going to win the case or not. So how do they behave when you get attacked? That's another key thing. Testing and auditing of your systems. Keep testing your systems, testing your processes, updating your processes. You might find you have a really good attack, a really good response to it, but you find there's a major weakness in your process. Change that. Keep moving forward with your processes. It's not just sitting on your laurels and saying, yeah, we got a good process, we'll sit back now. Continual improvement. Look at driving on and improving how you actually do it. Threat intelligence. Try to see what's happening to your competitors out in the market, what's happening to other teams, customers. Listen to people. Get the feedback so you can try and prepare for attacks. You might not always do it. At least you'll be one step ahead of the game. You're actually trying to look what's happening in the moment. If you see a DDoS going around the UK, various people getting hit, start to get people to monitor for it. Look for that. Look for signs of it. Be prepared. Threat intelligence. Professionalism. Get your people working professionally. Yeah? Get them proud of the job and what they do and how they do it. That'll all come across in a court. They've got to stand up and give evidence. It's really key to do that. During an attack. What do they do during an attack? Well, you log the incidents and you start documenting everything. But then, what's the key objective of your team? Is it to get service back for the customers or for you to do an investigation? Is it a criminal act or is it a breach of policy? And how are you going to deal with each one as they come along? Totally deal in different ways. So if you've got to restore operational functions and then obviously protect your customers' data and your own infrastructure, then maybe the investigation doesn't get a higher priority. Because you're keen to get, but you still got to carry on collecting as much evidence as you can and do as much as you can in the background and that side of it. Looking at the actual calls, you'll get technical bridge calls and get managerial bridge calls. It's very key they're separate. Yeah? Some of the senior managers will not understand what the technical people are talking about. So you'll have the two bridges running in parallel. The technical people keep the managers informed of what's happening. And they're making the strategic decisions on what's going to happen. And it's key you actually get that in place because that way they can feed into each other quite well. In that, it's not just the technical people and the managers. You've got legal, your comms people, PR, security, regulatory, operational, service management, retail, marketing. Everybody involved with management, it has got an impact on their area of business. So you've got to have them on the call so they can actually give you information from their areas as well. Key on that side of it. The investigation at the end, so you've decided whether it's criminal or whether it's a breach of policy. So you're going to deal with it differently. Collect and store the evidence adherence to all the laws of that country. It's not just about the UK. If you're in a different country, the laws might be different how you can collect evidence. Have you got that in your process? For each individual country you're actually trading in. So it's key that you get the evidence in place using the laws of that country, the country the data is stored in. It's really key on that side of it. Use automated tools where possible. So when you go to court, if you've got an automated tool, there's less human interaction, there's more chance the data will be accepted on that side. And ensure you document everything, even your rationale for making decisions. Why did you decide to do that at that time? If you're asking a court of law or later on, you've got to know why you actually decided to do that on that side of it. Post-attack. Obviously, you want to review. Did everything work right? Well, your process is really sort of top of a poor. The areas you've got to improve in. So what did you actually do there? What can you do in future to improve this? And the other thing is if you've got to change process or put some mitigation in place, who's going to manage that mitigation? Who's going to measure, make sure it's done? It's not, oh yeah, we need to improve the firewalls, we need to improve this. Who's going to take that, own it and deliver it, raise a risk on it and make sure it's actually put in place? And all the way through check that it's done on the timescales and milestones. So there's a lot to do before you start, having a team that's prepared and know what they're doing, to the end, did everything work okay? And a lot in between. That's it from me, thank you.
Tom, thanks very much. John?
Yeah, very quickly. I think that some of the challenges around cybersecurity faced by government are quite unique. We share a lot with industry, but we also have challenges that are unique in our own right. Because if you think about the scale of what we do, the DWP is one of the largest departments of state, have some 23 million customers, many of which are some of the most vulnerable members of society. So we have to be able to provide that continuity of service to them, regardless of what's happening. So it's absolutely vital for us that we prepare in every way for anything that's going to disrupt our services so that we can do the job that we need to do. Part of that, though, is we're currently undergoing a transformation as a department, delivering more of our services via digital channels. Now, that presents threats that are new to us that we have to be able to cope with, but it also presents great opportunities, I think, for us in the security community, because part of the issue I think that the security community have faced traditionally has been the disalignment between what the business is trying to do and what the technology and security community are trying to do to bring that together. And anywhere where you have gaps, you've got opportunity for adversaries to exploit. So by delivering our services more via the digital channels, it actually draws the technology organization closer to alignment with the business. And I think that's a real opportunity for us all in security. We are also shifting from a more traditional model of where we try and protect and prevent things to one of detection and aligning response in that continuous cycle. Because it's absolutely vital for us that every time we have an incident, that we're able to both learn from it from an intelligence perspective, but also learn from it and how we enhance and improve our security posture. Now, as part of that, we've created a single security organisation. So traditionally we had personnel security was separate from IT security, was separate from physical security. By bringing all of those together, we've removed vulnerabilities in the organisational structure. That means we've got a much more joined up response. We've created a CERT, not with a C, with an S, which is Security Incident Response Team, who are key individuals, one of whom is here today in the audience, I've noticed, that will help us to deal with those incidents. And to me, part of the preparedness that Tom spoke about is making sure you've got the very best people who work well under pressure and are able to respond in a clear and well-prepared way when the heat is on. In that, we're developing scenarios both for internal preparation for cybersecurity incidents, but also working with CERT-UK and other partners to actually test ourselves and make sure that while we might think we're ready, we know we're ready. And the two things, I think, are subtly different. So I think a final key thought from me, though, is that learning as part of that response process is absolutely vital, and making sure that as and when we see new incidents emerging, we're able to develop new security capabilities and controls that can help us to prevent that and work with others to make sure that they're prepared for the next time we experience something.
Excellent. Okay, thanks very much for that. Well, we've got plenty of time for audience questions. I think so much time, in fact, I suppose I'll abuse the prerogative of the chair to ask the very first question. We've talked a lot about internal preparedness, situational awareness, and I really like the point around surviving as a mechanism. One of the things we haven't touched on is the supply chain yet in this discussion, and the way in which that can serve, quite often it does serve as a vector for a breach for much larger parent organizations. How is that dealt with? What kind of auditing mechanisms, how far upstream or downstream do you think it's appropriate to go, or are you capable of going in your own organizations? Reflecting, for example, on the fact that with a Target breach of a year and a half ago, it was their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning supplier that was the initial vector.
I absolutely echo that, and it's fundamentally something we look very closely at. My organisation was primarily focused at critical national infrastructure, and there's sort of a list of are you or are you not on the critical national infrastructure. We're very cognizant that if someone is in the supply chain for the critical national infrastructure, that's just as important. And we are very open in what we will deal with once we're convinced that there's a good rationale for it. And we work a lot of cases that are very deep down into the supply chain, into that critical national infrastructure. Now, the government is pushing the Cyber Essentials schemes such as that, which we would like companies to bring on board the Cyber Essentials, which is a reasonable set of cyber hygiene standards, but push that down their supply chain and push that through there to try and bring up that general level of awareness. I've seen more than enough examples to know that at the moment it is not where it needs to be, without a doubt. And that's very much, when we talk about that, we talk about Target, and that Target could have been very good, their supply chain was not, and that's where they fell over.
Right. Yeah, from my point of view, there's several areas. The main thing is, if you're going to deal with a partner, you need to get it contractually. Security's got to be in the contract and by design. So when you first start negotiating, make sure you've got security as one of the key deliverables in that contract, and that you cover all the areas. So it's really key that you have that, and then you audit it. You don't just get it in the contract, then believe they're going to do it. So you've got to prove they do it every year. So go back to these companies. audit, have a rolling program of audit going and do spot checks on the companies to make sure they're adhering to the policies. Because they can have a contract and sign, but how do you know they're actually funding all the security they should be in that place? So make sure you audit the companies, you get someone out to check the companies, make sure they're delivering. And if you have an incident with one of the companies, make sure you go in and check all their process procedures and go through them all. So.
I think for me, put the challenge back to yourselves as an organisation. So rather than saying, it's almost an adversarial relationship of why isn't this supplier adhering to ISO 27001 critical control number 1 through 4 or whatever it is, look at yourselves first and say, am I being an intelligent customer in this? Am I asking the right questions? Do I understand the services that they're providing for me? Do I have the people that are doing the checks? And if you think that one of your suppliers isn't doing something quite how you would want it, rather than trying to beat them up with a contract, actually work with them to put it right. Because some of these things that you need people to provide you with a service, and find they are getting appropriate reward for doing that, but you still need the service. So ensuring that you work with those people to overcome any difficulty you will reap the benefit of it, because ultimately they're securing your organisation.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Let's open the floor up for questions. Just raise your hand. A microphone will be with you shortly. We've got one here and then one in the back.
Hi, thanks. I'd like to pick up on Tom's point about auditing your suppliers for security. If you flip that around, Telefonica is a supplier to many, many organizations. Are you really happy for all of them to audit you, do spot checks on you, and check up on this stuff? It doesn't sound like this will scale very well. And I guess the flip side of that is that if you just restrict it to kind of your key suppliers and doing audits and so on with them, then the attack will just target the lower down the food chain.
Yeah, I think it's the criticality of the infrastructure actually protecting for you as well on that side of it, what they're actually delivering for your company on this side of it. But that should, again, be security by design means that when you're actually firstly negotiating the contract, you'll see what areas you've got to cover for security. If they're key critical areas, you're going to want them audited, because an excuse is, well, I didn't know, it's not going to roll at the end. So if you have got the checks in place, it shows that you are trying to protect your customers' data, protect that system, because you're actually putting the effort in to do that. It is a lot more work and it's more resource. It costs more money to do that, but it's something you've got to do, I think, to keep that information secure.
We've got a question back here, and then we've got one on the side here.
Thank you. I was heartened to hear what Tom said about considering the legal aspect whilst the cyber attacks occurring. Coming from a law enforcement background, what do you think could be done to improve the amount of reporting that happens to law enforcement? We feel there's a massive underreporting of cyber attacks. We feel that perhaps people aren't considering the legal aspect or the criminal court aspect during the attack. What do you think could be improved with police and law enforcement in order to improve the conviction rate at court?
Yeah, from my point of view, if you try to report something in, you've got to go to action fraud in a lot of cases, which is not the most helpful place to report a cyber incident online on the system. I think having some more face-to-face dialogue with a trained officer who understands the subject would be excellent. If it's a major thing, you go to the NCA, you've got trained people, or you go to UK CERT for some advice and guidance. But if you're a general public, if you've got an issue, who do you go to? Local police station, they'll log it and you'll never hear nothing again. Action fraud online, you'll log it, you'll get a reference number, no nothing again. So I think it's having that feedback that something's actually happening to the information you're giving in. Now, at a sort of corporate level, we have a good relationship with UK CERT, government, the law enforcement agencies, and we work with them. But for the general public or SME, it can be quite different. The experience can be quite different. So I think it's the initial interface. You're actually going to get something done when you report it, and the police have got the skills to deal with what you're giving them and the knowledge. I think that's the main thing.
Right.
Could I just say, I mean, within government, we're mandated as to how we report incidents anyway, whether that's through GovCert or through, with CERT-UK, depending on the scale of the incident. But as equally as important about the law enforcement aspect is about, how do we share that with partners? I think that, the CISP initiative that with CERT-UK about how we can share information as a community, because you can bet that if somebody is attacking the banks one day, then they're going to be attacking government and potentially another part of industry the next. So how we can collectively get that information into a place so that we can all benefit from it, I think is really important. The scale of it, though, from a law enforcement perspective, I mean, you don't really want everybody ringing up the police when they have a malware infection on their home system. So it's getting the balance right, and I think if law enforcement can actually demonstrate some tangible results to the general public, then that would probably shift that dynamic somewhat.
I'd add, we work very closely with law enforcement. As a CERT, we are not a legal regulatory reporting point. Technically telling us is not telling law enforcement, but we're very cognizant that we see stuff that may help build a law enforcement case. So we have NCA, NCCU, City of London Police sitting in our incident handling section, seeing pretty much everything that comes across. Originally, when the CISP was built 2 years ago, there was this concern that people wouldn't share with us if they knew it was going to law enforcement. I have seen no evidence of that being a problem. To be frank, the people, when we have law enforcement on board, they proved enormously valuable, and we work very closely with some of them on, the Optovar and the OpDisputed, taking down, big malware attacks and so on. So we have a very close relationship. I am all for reporting. As far as I'm concerned, if we don't, nail these guys at the end, they will just carry on. So, deflecting them is good, but getting them to a court, getting them, to a point where something happens to them is a good thing. I'm all for it.
Let me just follow on from that before we take the next question. We've got two pieces of a regulation from the European Union coming down the road, the General Data Protection Regulation, due to be approved early next year, 2-year implementation period, and then organizations will have to report to their national authority. At the moment, the draft says within 72 hours. Now, much of that will be based on the risk of the information that was compromised. So, if the laptop's encrypted, then you are unlikely to have to report it. Is this something that you're thinking about now in all your organizations? Because there's this, and then we've also got the Network and Information Security Directive as well, which isn't going to have breach reporting so far, according to what I've heard, but it's going to have a lot of other areas where compliance will be required around an incident.
It's certainly something we're monitoring, watching, looking at. We're involved in some, we see some of the discussions going around Whitehall on it. I think we're waiting to see what finally comes out, because these things change on the turn of a dime sometimes, so you're never quite sure what's there. It talks about significant things. Well, we could all define significant in 26 ways, and none of them are going to agree. So we're really waiting to see the meat of what comes out. I am a firm believer in that voluntary is better. I think you get better information sharing. I'm not sure that in the throes of a major incident, having to work out which of the 28 EU nation states and what format and whatever is really going to help. Although, as I think we'd heard earlier, I'd love to see more information reporting. I'd love to see more sharing and collaboration. Right. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah, I think from our point of view is we already have to report already to Ofcom, security incidents, and we have to report to the ICO anyway. So it'll be another body. I hope they coordinate it better so we can do one set reporting, not 3. Because I think as a business, you don't be sending reports of various areas. Can the UK sort of get one central point for reporting, either the ICO, Ofcom, or EU, and that'd be easier for us as a company.
Right. Yeah. Likewise, I would echo all of that. We currently have to report through the Information Commission's officers, the Office of the Government CIRO. So to have some more legislation to comply with, it's we'll see what it is and then we'll act accordingly.
Got a question hanging on patiently over here, I believe.
Hi, I just had a question around cyber insurance. There's some noise from government about cyber insurance tied in with cyber essentials and a few things like that. Do you see that as an enabler as to kind of response or a get-out clause for companies as far as cyber response and attacks concerned?
So personally, and this is me speaking personally, you can go this 2 ways. I've got cyber insurance, I don't need to do anything, I'll get paid out. The way the government is driving this is that if you want to get cyber insurance, you will have to demonstrate that you are good. Cyber Essentials is one means of that, but by demonstrating that you have good cyber practices, you will get cheaper cyber insurance. Therefore, it's a market driver to to get people to get cyber insurance and to drive it into the market, rather than a legal, regulatory or mandatory framework. So that's certainly the model we're looking at, is people will need to demonstrate good to get cheaper insurance, therefore it's a financial impact to them to do better at this.
Yeah, from my point of view is that I've looked at cyber insurance. Again, we're investing millions in the infrastructure to protect it anyway. What's a balance in the insurance? It's actually working. It's what's the actual balance between insurance and investing in your infrastructure. You know, do you want to protect your customers? Do you want to insure against them being hurt? So I think it's a sort of balancing act at the moment. And I'm sort of on the fence at the moment on that.
I think for ourselves, as a Department of State, are we really ever going to be truly able to transfer risk to an insurance company for the services we deliver? Somehow I don't think so. But if insurance, as Chris said, is a mechanism that means organisations, the sort of smaller scale, or our suppliers, for example, have got to raise their game in order to prove their cyber security capabilities before they can get insurance, then actually that has to be a good thing.
And it could help to, over time, develop a stronger set of metrics around preparedness, which gives the insurance company a better way of pricing the risk.
Yeah, and I think there's a concern now that everyone figures that every insurance company will weasel word their way out of paying out anything. So, we need more clarity, I think, on it generally. It's got to be a more standard offering.
It's pretty, I'll jump in very briefly on this, but it's quite limited in the UK thus far. And you'd struggle to put together a policy of more than 100 million in most instances. It's slightly more developed in the US, in part because of the breach reporting each of the individual states requires. And so there's a lot of attendant costs that come with that kind of reporting and insurance products that fill that niche. In some clauses, we say cyber insurance, but actually some of that coverage exists already in business continuity and disaster recovery clauses. And then sometimes it ends up having to go through the courts to prove that you can actually claim for a digital incident instead of a flood that causes the same level of disruption. So it's still pretty early days for that, from what I've seen. Any other questions out there? I suspect such a timid audience. While you're, one in the front here. All right.
Hi. What advice would you give to people suffering the new generation of destructive cyber attacks, seeing as you go to would probably be targets for it?
Was that to me? Sorry. Yeah. Get the basics right is probably where I'd come from. So, what is it that's going to make you vulnerable? So understanding what it is you care most about, start there and work your way out. But yeah, get the basics right, because as you know, most cyber attacks, the vulnerabilities they will seek to exploit, most of them are well known. So getting that right, then you can get yourself in a good start position.
Yeah, same thing for me. It's vulnerability management's key. Yeah, ensuring that you keep your infrastructure up to date with the latest technology, and continued monitoring your system, checking for instance, checking what's coming in, what's happening in your network. Having that overview of your network and the dashboard, you can see what's happening across your company is a key thing.
I think it's knowing what you care about, knowing what can, are collateral damage, and knowing what truly are your crown jewels that you really do need to defend. When government does this by having, different systems for different stuff and they're not interconnected. I've never seen that outside of government, but that kind of, this is stuff I really, really, really care about, and I'm not going to connect it to the internet, or I'm not going to have it to be generally available. It's going to be very firewalled off. Good cyber hygiene that says people only see stuff they need to know, so the person who gets hacked out in the periphery cannot make their way to the center. That kind of thing would be enormously valuable.
That's a good question, and I guess it could be applied to a variety of different sectors. When I think about that, I think of industrial control systems, or heavy industry in general. Sectors which have quite a lot of legacy technology buried in the background, and where it's a real challenge to keep up to date and to put the latest systems in. You have to do expensive workarounds to get systems to talk to each other, much less to protect them. Is that something any of you have dealt with, kind of working through legacy systems in an attempt to actually, not just to make them compatible, but actually to secure them?
I think every company has that challenge at some stage. You know, things come to the end of their life, you've got to replace them. Legacy systems, it's keeping on top of them and knowing where your legacy systems are and try to put a plan in place to actually change them over before they get to the end of life. So it's having that continual rollover of technology and knowing when something's going to come to the end of life and having a plan in place to change it and update it.
Yeah, likewise for us, every organisation, particularly a large-scale organisation, will have challenges when it comes to replacing and remediating systems that are providing critical services for them. So back to the point about knowing what your critical services are, and getting the basics right with them, you should be able to plan ahead and work out ways to replace those when they come towards the end of their lives.
If I could add, so on the CISP, we went live shortly before Windows XP went end of life. And on the CISP, someone posted anonymously, because we allow people to post anonymously if they don't want to fess up to the rest of the membership who they are, that they were running in Windows XP and that there was no way they were going to be off XP by the these 5 days that they had to do so. And some 30 other companies all jumped in with, this is how you can harden Windows XP. All right, it's out of life, it's not going to get the support, but there's lots and lots of things you can do to it. So it's not just, you shouldn't just retreat into your bunker of, oh my God, I've got a problem and I'm not going to tell anyone. There are people out there who can help you mitigate stuff while you look for the right solution. And the right solution is get onto a later operating system without a doubt. But it's not the end of the world. There are advice and help out there. That was very powerful for us.
And Microsoft will charge you a hefty fee for continuing support for XP.
The UK government took advantage of it.
I believe they did. If you're thinking of questions, put your hands up. I wanted to touch on one thing that I don't think we've really tackled yet, and that's
right at the back.
Is there one at the back?
Yeah.
No, he's hiding behind the screen. Yes, way back in the corner there.
Thank you very much. John, you talked about bringing together all the areas of security, which some of us have been campaigning for, called convergence or enterprise security risk management. And I wondered if you could describe a scenario, or perhaps a couple of you could, on a blended attack, on a cyber blended attack on your system, and how one team would do this better than perhaps a separate team. So you've got a converged team together looking at that attack and how that is better than not doing it that way. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Just take a simple example like somebody using physical access into one of your sites in order to gain access to your IT network or to your Wi-Fi network in some way. That if you don't have a linkage between your physical controls about how people gain access and then gain access to your IT, you've got a problem. And if they're in two different parts of the forest, how are they going to be joined up to make sure that your understanding of the vulnerabilities on the physical access to your sites is actually aligned with the vulnerabilities that you know about regarding access to your IT system? So not joining those two things up is really important. HR security is another one. If you don't do appropriate checks and understanding the people that are working for you and the potential insider threat that you could be facing, then again, how can you protect your IT systems?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, physical security links in well. If you're trying to trace someone in a building or someone's logged in from a building, you believe, if you can get the physical evidence as well as the logical evidence, CCTV footage, access control doors, where every person's went following around the building, so you can then mirror to the case is better. You've got a better case then to bring to a court because you can prove the person was in the building, you can prove they're logged in, you've got images of them, and you've got the logs from the access control. So having all this in one area, and also you've got the flexibility, because if you've got all the security in one area, you can cross-train people, and you get a bit more rapid response because you're requesting from your own area and not from another part of the organisation, which might have an SLA of 2 days to give you the logs. So if you can say, in your area, I want the logs within 1 hour or 2 hours, you're more in control. So you're more in control of getting that information quickly for any investigation.
I think the prime example I remember, this is a number of years ago, was the Japanese bank where the security guide was subverted. Keyloggers then placed on the back of systems, passwords and whatever taken. They tried to push through a whole bunch of financial transactions. And then if memory serves me correctly, cut through the network cables of the system so that when the folks turned up the following day, they couldn't actually log in to get into the systems to find out what was wrong. And if I remember rightly, it was purely a formatting error on the transfer that actually failed, but it was truly a blended attack. You know, it was subverted physical people, it was cyber because they were doing key logging, they were hacking their way through the network. Very, very interesting piece, and that went to court a number of years ago. That was a truly good. I can't talk about current examples, I'm afraid, because I'm not allowed. I'm not going to talk about those.
Oh. Let me go back to one thing. Chris, you mentioned earlier around APT, and you might as well just throw away the advanced bit. I mean, we see so many attacks come into light now, quite regularly. It's with almost clockwork precision. And we hear the same excuse again and again. It was a sophisticated attack, maybe even unprecedented. And I sometimes wonder whether any company will actually fall victim to an unsophisticated attack. I mean, this goes, I guess, to the public response bit.
It does.
Where we kind of, in so many cases, we hear the same canned PR response. It was unprecedented, very sophisticated, nothing we could do, not our responsibility. How can we, over time, I could see how that would reduce trust amongst users, among customers, who are just trotting out the same old line, almost a neither confirm nor deny sort of line, to put it in one respect. It seems deficient. Is there a need to improve that public response?
So there's a general need to improve general cyber hygiene. I can look back at incidents that we have worked recently which are, badly configured SQL servers. Well, that's something we've known about for 20 years. We know how to configure an SQL server, so we know how to patch it, and we know how to secure it, yet we still see fairly advanced, they're not advanced, but they found that server. They've gone through the estate, everything's really good, there's the one that isn't. So that's what I'm saying. It's the persistence. It's not just I'm going to go for that server and just hack that one server. They'll look at all the ways in, and there's the one that's badly configured. So good cyber hygiene across the board, proper patching, proper management, proper software updates, etc., would solve an awful lot of the problems we see. Cyber essentials for what, to me, as someone who's spent a number of years in this game, is not a high, really, really secure stuff, would solve a vast percentage of the incidents I work. Having proper, using proper identity management, having people rationalize, you're not running web servers as root, so when the server gets hacked, they've got root. Just good cyber hygiene would solve a lot of the problems we see and would kill most of the work I deal with.
Yeah, that's what I add on from Chris then. I think good asset management. Do you know where all your assets are? Do you know who owns the asset? Do you know what level of patching it's at? Have you got a picture across your whole infrastructure? Because it's knowing exactly what you own and having that database of what you own, who owns each individual bit. Who's responsible for patching that box? Has someone brought a box and plugged on the network and hasn't followed policy? So you do scanning your network to see if anything else on your network. So it's having all that, doing that proactive work and making sure that you know what assets are under your control. And Chris mentioned earlier as well, again, about hygiene. We all know about DDoS attacks. We all know about botnets. The actual awareness of computer security amongst the general public is poor. So if you look from a policing point of view, making sure from a policing point of view, prevention is one of the best things. And I think as a country, we've got to do more on prevention and get more people to think more about security on their own laptops, desktops, etc. Because a lot of the attacks we get externally against our companies are from botnets and things like that. And you need to start looking at how do we engage the public to start helping us secure the infrastructure.
I think from my perspective, most advanced and persistent threats that you read about when you actually get to the detail of them, they don't start in a very advanced way. They usually start with an email that somebody opens. That's not really that technically challenging for people to do. The fact that it's able to exploit systems is largely, as Chris and Tom have said, is because you haven't got the basics right on your own networks. So
you're running admin on your laptop. Well, they can do what they like. It's that kind of basic stuff that we need to get right.
What about, okay, so that's on the kind of the technical and the procedural side, and mostly on the back end, out of public view. But what about the response element that's in public view? I mean, we don't need Seb Blatter to show us how not to do crisis response. There are plenty of other examples in the InfoSec space as well, where senior executive comes out front, gives an early statement, and then it's constant changes or retractions to that, and a progressive loss of confidence in the ability of that organization to handle a data breach that could compromise tens of millions of customer details. How can we improve in that space?
So again, we would say plan, exercise, prepare, make sure that everybody who needs to be aware of what's going to go on in your organisation when that happens is fully involved in that. So you don't, you look at RSA. RSA get hacked a number of years ago. Of all the companies that, big security company prides itself when it gets hacked, comes out smelling of roses. Absolutely, almost no feedback. Target, a shop, gets absolutely hammered because they handled it so badly. And it's all about having that plan in place, having all the right people in place, so you don't face, Ronald Reagan got shot and they're all start arguing about who's in charge right now. This is not the time to be arguing about who's going to take what responsibility, who's going to be talking about what, and who's going to be doing what. You need to have that plan, prepared, exercised before you get to that point. So it's a slick, to be fair, a slick, well-oiled machine. When it happens, you know what you're going to say. You've got lines to take. You've got a plan in place.
Yeah, I think from that point of view, I mentioned earlier that preparation beforehand, when you have these bridge calls during an incident, you'll have your PR people on there, your comms people, your legal people, your business people from various areas, your business that are in there, and they understand the impact to the customers in their area. Yeah, so any comms that goes out will go through these people who know their customers. So they're the experts in that area. We'll provide them with that information relevant to that incident so they can actually know the briefing factually out exactly what happened, then that'll go out. So it's having the process in place with your comms people, your legal people, to ensure that you get the right message out to your customers.
I think from big organisations, that's fairly straightforward to do, because you'll have media people, you'll have legal people, you'll have comms people, and likewise that should then just become part of your incident response process. For smaller organisations, though, it's much more challenging, and really for them, I think it's more about thinking ahead and preparing by thinking, well, if this were to go public, what would it happen in terms of my organisation's reputational damage? So how do you think about how you would handle the media in those circumstances? Because the reputational damage for organisations with incidents of this type is it's absolutely critical that we get that bit right.
Just on our CISP, we actually have an exercising area where we drop in, exercises you can run in your own company, run through it, and it brings up all those points and hopefully makes you think about how to do it.
We've got a few minutes left in the session here. If there's any final questions, toss your hand. I've got one right here. Fair enough.
Yeah, hello. So I think a lot of people who work in the industry, they're not entirely happy with the expertise in their organisation and perhaps the controls. So what's your position on getting perhaps a contract with the fourth line response and investigation company, so that in the event that you're not happy with some of the data you're seeing, so perhaps from your SIEM, and you think you are under attack, that you've got an option to call somebody in to assist with the investigation and response. So I guess it's like a contract that you can call expertise into the company. So I just wonder what your position is on that. I would think a lot of companies who may have this in place wouldn't want to admit they have it in place, being another possibility.
So it's a firm tenet from everything I hear in government that is a business's problem to have a business process and a plan in place to deal with incidents. CERT-UK does not have blue flashing lights and runway kit and the rest of it. We are here to help you do your role, but it's a business's problem to do that. Now, you can choose to do that by having your own team, or you can choose to do that by using one of the many forensics companies around. If you really want to get to the top end, GCHQ have certified a number of CIR certified incident response companies who are very, very good at this. Now, I'm afraid they're not cheap, but they're very, very good. But there is a middle ground on that. You don't have to go to that level unless need be. But yeah, absolutely, have a company on call, have them on tap, have them helping you do the exercises and so on, and have them available to call in when needed, because they are good at this.
I think, as Chris said, it's the cost for doing that could be a lot. If you're going to go for one of the top end people, it can be very expensive. If you're going to go for a mid-range company to do that for you, what are their credentials?
That's the
yeah, will they stand up in a court? Yeah, are they experts? How many court cases have they done in the past? Yeah, so I'll do some. If you're going to partner with someone, I'll do some research, some due diligence into the company to make sure that they're very good at their job and their credentials are very good.
I think, if I've understood the question right, what you're saying is you've got a lack of confidence in your supplier in the first place. So you're using a second supplier to check the first supplier is doing the job that you're paying them?
So not so much supplier, but in your overall capability on your network.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be your direct company. So it's just the option of getting a contract for expertise.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's back to the point, be an intelligent customer. Make sure that you understand what it is you want to know about your systems. And if you don't think you're getting that service from either your internal team or a supplier, then you've got to work with them to make sure they can get it right.
Yeah, but it's firmly your problems. That's the government message: is we are not going to do this for you. It needs to be something that business understands and gets to grips with themselves, and build their own, yes, expensive, or subcontract, or bring someone in on a retainer. That's the way to go.
Great. Well, that brings us very nearly to the end of the session. Our speakers have kindly given us a few takeaway points that reflect, bring back some of what they've discussed here. We've heard a fair amount around situational awareness, a variety of different ways to prepare in advance, quite clearly knowing what the key objectives are for surviving and recovering from the attack, and some strong points around alignment between the technology and business, joining up of security teams. I thought that was quite a useful point, and how that can be difficult to do, but it can bear some really useful fruit on the far side when something almost inevitably does happen. With that, I'd like to thank you very much. We'll bring the session to a close, and please thank our speakers.